think the National Fire Chiefs Council were there as well, but the London Fire Brigade were there also, and they were basically explaining that the portal, they had a few problems at the beginning, but that's all operational now, and they are expecting everybody to be registering on it.
Right. Okay.
So Tower Hamlets have registered theirs, and they've got 78 blocks.
Okay.
So they're quite. I think you've got about 100, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I mean, this will be on the radar of the team, rather than ourselves. But I hadn't heard that the portal had been finalised and it had been launched. But maybe my building safety colleagues will be all over that, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing at the moment is, and that's part of, I think the challenge is that the fire safety side of things, if you look at it from a point of view of, I mean, what I've discovered, having started down this journey, because we've now been working with Origin. I'm talking about with my active plan hat now. We've been working with Origin for the last 2 months, creating the fire plans for them, having surveyors go in, do the scanning, generating the floor plans and the like.
Yeah.
And what's been interesting about that is what is is working out the practical workflow. I mean, I think Enzo, is Enzo still on the call? Because I saw him come in earlier.
He was here, wasn't he?
No, he's okay. So I know Enzo, under the, in our Golden Thread group, he was heading up the visualization side of things. So I was just going to see if I can get some feedback from him. But anyway, what's been interesting about that is that the surveyors who are doing the measured surveys and producing the floor plans, they don't have the competence to be able to determine which doors are fire doors and whether they are 30-minute or 60-minute doors.
Yeah.
And even, things like the other fire related assets, they can identify that there's a fire lift there, or they can identify that there's an AOV, but they can't, they don't have the skills to be able to say what type of item it is. So what we're now doing is we're doing a process whereby specialists for maybe fire doors, AOVs, fire dampers, smoke dampers would then be able to visit the virtual 360 view, and make a remote assessment of something, so that at least you're identifying how many doors there are that are going to need inspecting.
Yeah.
And then when you can schedule a physical visit, because the fire door inspectors that we've got involved, we've now got about 50, no, in fact, probably 60 or 70 fire door inspectors come into BIM4Housing. We've recruited quite a few, because what we're doing with them is looking at standardizing the way fire door inspections are done.
Yeah.
And by going through that process, the fire door people can then plan their work, because it seems to do fire door inspections, proper fire door inspections on a block of flats could take easily a couple of weeks.
Yes.
And it depends really on the scope. Do you take off all the architrave and
look at the gaps?
Yeah. And if you do that, then that's more work, because not only is that will take longer, even longer, but it will also mean remedial works.
Yeah, of course.
So what we're trying to do at the moment is look at the practical way of doing that on a risk-based basis as well, because that's the other point. Some of the housing associations, one of them on a session a couple of weeks ago was saying they have a policy whereby if they don't have the certificates for a door, then it's considered to be non-compliant and therefore it needs to be replaced. Now,
Wow.
that's a big, and the fire door inspectors who were on the call said, no, that's not necessary. It should be on a risk-based approach.
Yeah.
And also, as long as you can inspect it, and I think they call them notional fire doors. So it is a fire door. It appears to have the right specification. It just doesn't have the certificate.
Yeah.
And these are all nuanced things, David, that I think we need to be taking account of, because what I'm learning is that when people replace the fire door, that may not be the answer, because 75% of the fire doors that are being inspected, brand new ones, are failing inspection.
Wow.
75%. So you could well be making the building less safe by
Do you know if that's the door or the way it's been installed? Because,
Yeah.
of course, it could easily be.
It's the way it's
I mean, I'm
installed
not
largely.
a building surveyor, so I'm just being really stupid on this call. But it did occur to me that you can buy a product. It's actually the installation, not having, I don't know, intermittent strips or what have you,
Yeah, that's
or
right.
the wrong architecture, the wrong ironmongery, etc., etc. There
Mm.
are many things that could make it non-compliant, not just the physical door. I wondered if there's more detail behind that statistic, because there's probably a bigger story. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No. That's the point about this, Steve. This is this community for asking questions. No, that's exactly right. The doors have typically been provided by people who are qualified and certified installers, so you'd expect them to be doing that properly. I think in most cases they're procured as door sets, so they should be right. But in some cases, the ironmonger is not right, which obviously, if you procure a pure door set, it shouldn't be the issue. But it's also the gaps and things like that. So it is, and I think another thing I've been told is that it depends on, when it's delivered to site, where it's stored, if it's installed and it's cold or wet or whatever, then it may well go out. But so coming back to the point, David, what we're finding is that because these fire doors are maybe $3 or $4 each.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Not cheap.
So if you've got to replace 1,000,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
big chunk, especially if you then got to have them inspected, and also because that simply relying on the fact they're coming from a qualified and certified installer doesn't seem to be enough.
No. Okay. I mean, certainly. I mean, as you know, we employ fire consultants post contracts to do a lot of the kind of quality inspections.
Say that again. Sorry, you employ who?
So we employ fire consultants post contract to do a series of kind of quality inspections. We've set out a schedule of everything that we want them to look at, and fire doors is on that list. But even fire consultants find that they can observe the fire door. They can, if they're tagged as fire doors and labelled as fire doors, because I think fire doors should come with there's a disc that they should have.
Yeah, they should.
And that makes them easier to identify. But the biggest issue they tend to pick up is the gapping around the threshold of the doors. Sometimes that can be too large. But as you say, if you're using certified installers, then you'd have imagined that that's the first thing that they would understand. But yeah, we can put all the controls in place that we want. You know, we can take all the photographs we want, and we can inspect as much as we like. There are still going to be issues that get raised, aren't there? Inevitably.
I became muted there for some reason.
You did.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
did.
Yes.
I drew for breath.
Okay, so yeah, I was looking really. I don't know in terms of this agenda. Have you got a view on any of that, Joe? Just bring you in.
No, I'm just trying to relate it to some of the things that within our practice, and in terms of designing new content for I'm spending quite a lot of time designing new Revit content, for example, for our libraries, and doors is always where we start and stumble.
Mm.
And
Forgive me, Joe. Where are you from, Joe?
I'm from AHR. We're architects and building surveyors.
Okay.
So there's two.
I didn't know that. You're building surveyors also, are you?
Yeah, we have a large team of building surveyors who are busy going around scanning all of these high rises, and so all this is kind of quite relevant. So they're based in our Huddersfield office, which is where I'm based. So I spend a lot of time with the building surveyors. So it's quite interesting to see the two different sides of the business and the two different kind of ways of looking at the same problems quite a lot.
Yes.
But for me, I'm detail driven. I'm that kind of techie architect, really. So making content, I kind of obsess over tolerances and undercuts on doors and all these things. And quite often from architects, the feedback is, "Oh, you're overthinking this," and I'm kind of like thinking, not really.
No.
Because then I see, with the building surveying team, they work with people who own estates and a lot of housing associations, etc. And their problems are huge, because so it's interesting. I'm kind of wondering what involvement our building surveyors have got in this kind of topic of they go out. We've got quite a big team who go out laser scanning and scan to BIM service. I don't think one of the issues that they've always had, or they've been doing that for a long time, and they're all qualified surveyors who do it. And one observation that they've made in the last few years is that because the scanning technology has become cheaper and easier to use, there's a lot of scanning companies out there who are not qualified surveyors in any way. So they're just people who go out and they will scan something for cash, basically. And their beef is always, how do they distinguish themselves from essentially what is a service that's ultimately cheaper but doesn't have any qualifications behind it ultimately. So I'm going to have a conversation on the back of this with them, particularly our scanning guys, to say, what do you do in terms of identifying fire doors? Do you identify them? They probably don't. I hope they don't, because as you say, they're probably not qualified to do so. They're more qualified than someone who's just bought a scanner. But but they've always had this issue with the work that they do. They're very scared of making any assumptions. So even doing existing surveys, they'll say, I can only guarantee where the surface of this wall is, and the odds are that's a blockwork wall, but I'm not going to say it's a blockwork wall unless I do an intrusive survey, and you're not going to pay me to do that. So
I think that the point, Joe, it is really well made there, and that is that what we need to do is recognise that this is a journey in terms of capturing the data, and the approach that certainly we're taking on the project that we're doing. We've got two main ones at the moment. One is with Tower Hamlets, and the other is with Origin. And the approach that we're taking is that the information needs to be adequate to satisfy the regulations in terms of fire plans. So we need symbols on drawings and things like that that look right. There's no standard for symbols, by the way.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that-
So what we've tried to create some that, you know, with that we can use, which I'm happy to share with you, and you can pass them on to your colleagues.
Right.
But what we've done is made them as machine addressable blocks. So in other words, just to, I mean, you know this better than me. The just have a AutoCAD block that has got enough intelligence in it that we can then bring it into the database and then add information to it. So in other words, it comes through, it might come through just as a door, but it's a door object that we can then say, right, that's a door object, it's in a fire compartment, so it's going to be acting as a fire door. Now, what the rating is of that may be a combination of what wall it's in, and then having to go back and look at the declarations of performance or whatever the data sheet is for that door, to then increment it. And it means that we've got something that is a journey. Therefore, if you do qualify it, which you might well do, you could actually say, well, this is our assessment at this stage, and at least it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
I suppose the difficulty for any professional is being caught out with that liability, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that.
I was going to make that point, George, actually, just coming back to something that you said originally about the remediation on a fire door coming down to a risk assessment. And we're finding that in some areas it is quite difficult to actually get someone prepared to do a risk assessment that results in a decision to actually physically do something,
Or not do it.
or not do it. And we've got an interesting example at the moment where obviously the topic of the moment is all around second staircases and government consultation on the 30-meter threshold. Well, we've internally made a decision to set a standard at 18 meters in the absence of anything else, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why we've decided to do that. But in addition to that, we have asked our projects to consider the introduction of a second staircase for buildings under 18 meters, and do a risk assessment in order to evidence why they wouldn't want to put a second staircase in. And what that's responding to is a comment that we had from Fire Brigade a while ago, where they were very reluctant to put a height threshold because they wanted it to be a risk-based decision rather than a tick box exercise. Anyway, so we thought we were being rather clever, and so we'd ask our projects to do a risk assessment, and we took that to our fire consultants, who were very reluctant to do an assessment on that basis, and there seemed to be two reasons for that. One is approved document B, and BS 9991 is their safe haven, so they're more than happy to do an assessment of a design in terms of whether it meets a standard or whether it doesn't, and that's quite straightforward. But to ask them to make an assessment of risk that then results in a decision to either put a second staircase in or not was something that they felt was kind of beyond their responsibility, if you like, or something that they were reluctant to do, because that goes beyond the requirements of what ADB asks for. So it kind of gets them out of their comfort zone a little bit. And I guess you could apply the same argument to a fire door. You know, who's going to inspect a fire door and make a decision as to whether it needs to be replaced or whether it doesn't, based on risk? And
Yes.
I don't know the answer. But people generally seem more reluctant to do risk assessments, preferring to keep things as factual as they possibly can, and probably for good reason.
Paul, is that Paul White from? I know two Pauls. Are you Paul White from Enfield?
I am. I'm here. I'm
Hello,
at
Paul.
Enfield. I'm at Enfield for the next month.
Oh, right. Okay. Are
So
you
I'm
moving
working
on?
a period of leave
Oh, right. Okay.
notice. Sorry, notice at the moment. So
Where are you going
um,
to, Paul? Do you mind me asking?
I'm going to Gravesham in Kent.
Oh, right. Okay.
So yeah, senior development manager. So yeah, so it's yeah, it's all pretty much buttoned up now. So yeah, I've got a date. So yeah, so off I go.
Are you
But I'm
still going
trying
to
to
be
find.
involved with this?
So from Enfield's point of view, I'm trying to find a replacement, but I don't think you'll get a direct person in the development team. And I'm not sure you'd get the same because at the moment, obviously, we've had quite high staff turnover and things.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I'm just trying to set that up and trying to sort of because we've had obviously Sarah and Abigail and various other people, but yeah, I'll try and set it up before I go, and obviously try and find out about Gravesham. I don't know if you've had any contact with Gravesham.
No, but that would be good if we could.
Yeah,
How
so
what is to be honest, I don't know who Gravesham are. Is that a council again or?
yes, there's another council, so yes, so I'll be still in that in the world of council world, but yeah, um yeah, so it's a slightly elevated role, slightly different role rather than regeneration. It's development specifically. So
Good. Okay. Raymond, I think you're Harrow. Is that right?
Good afternoon. That's correct.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. So do you have a thought on this? I don't. I think you were on hold at one stage, so I don't know.
So I had to
maybe
take
catching you
a
out.
call. So I missed about 10 minutes or so. I had to take another call.
Yeah, what we've just been talking about is the need to is taking a risk-based approach rather than, for example, replacing all fire doors because you don't have a certificate for them.
Agreed. I'd agree with that. It makes more sense in terms of prioritizing things with potentially limited resources. Rather, taking a blanket approach, you may well be dealing with low risk stuff when you've got high risk stuff sitting there. So I totally agree.
Yeah, and the what David was saying from Notting Hill Genesis was that their fire engineers, there's a conversation about twin staircases as to at what point you actually make a decision as to whether you need a second staircase, and the approach that they were looking to do, it seems sensible to me, is do a risk-based approach, but the question is who signs that off. One of the challenges I find with all this, and it's been a bane of my life for probably 20 or 30 years in the construction industry, and that's people transferring risk.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And rather than the team taking a sensible view on it and saying, right, what is the actual risk of this situation? People aren't working collaboratively, and that's what I think we should be trying to do
isn't
more
it
of.
an insurance issue though? Are they all a bit worried about their insurance policies?
Most certainly.
Ultimately, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, one of the pieces of language that's emerging more readily now is the concept of a QDR process, and I think so. Quality design review process for fire safety matters particularly, and it tended to be a process that was required in exceptionally high buildings. Although what a high building wasn't particularly well defined. But we conceptually actually quite like the idea of a QDR process because it kind of brings stakeholders together, be that architects, be that fire consultants, be that fire brigade, be that building control, and it seems to be a pretty decent structured approach to how you would go about.
Is that a bit
setting.
like RACI then? You know, where you actually define this is what you are responsible for. All right.
No,
you know what I mean?
and it's and that's what I was going to come on to, Paul, because I think the QDR process is designed as a collaborative process. You know, so that the whole reason for doing it is you're trying to get all of the stakeholders bought into the kind of fire safety objectives for a building right from the outset, and then people can then evaluate that design against those objectives that everyone's bought into. What isn't necessarily clear through that is if it's a collaborative process, then is the decision making therefore collaborative, and therefore in terms of the kind of design risks and liabilities, are they shared, you know, or do they still, you know, are they then still retained by the various people that would take on those liabilities now? I don't know. But for us, we were trying to take the essence of that QDR process and apply it across other buildings as well, lower rise buildings, to try and make it a more collaborative process. We haven't quite got that off the ground yet, but again, not sure how our consultants and fire consultants will respond to that. You know, in terms of, you know, the implications to them around PI and the such like.
I think PI is a real, you know, something that is a real driver for bad practice, in my experience. And I don't know whether you know, but I spent 4 or 5 years on a R&D on a research project that came out with integrated project insurance. So the idea of integrated project insurance is that nobody on the project's got PI cover.
Okay.
Yeah, the project's got the PI cover, and the responsibility then is on the team to work collaboratively to identify problems and then resolve them.
Yeah.
And if something goes wrong, then in particular, you know, maybe delays or, you know, faults or whatever, it's the master insurance company takes the risk, but the team has actually worked to resolve it. Now, the reason I got involved in it, and it's won several awards actually. We have new contracts written, and it's now been used on several projects. Not enough, but what we did, it was based on something called HAPM, the Housing Association Property Mutual, and the philosophy behind that was to identify what things fail on buildings, because what was happening was that when housing associations were first started, as they came out of the councils, they couldn't get any insurance, because the track record for council built properties was so poor with the number of building failures that they couldn't get any cover. So what happened was set up as a mutual insurance fund, and all of the people that had projects that they wanted to cover, they took the premiums that the insurance companies wouldn't accept and put them into a pot. But what they also did was they identified the procedures that could be put in place to prevent building failure. And it's just so sensible, really. And then anybody that was a member of HAPM, you had to sign up to following that process. And an organisation called the Building Performance Group was set up, where they got 50 or 60 architects, engineers, surveyors, and they would do inspections of the materials that were going to be used. Really a proper clerk of works process. And as long as they signed it off, then everybody's happy. And almost in a very short space of time, it was in credit because there was no claims. And that just seems to me to be so sensible.
And contractors didn't like it because it was too thorough.
Possibly.
Be honest, they didn't. Their site managers didn't, because I remember it all. I remember thinking it was a good idea back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what you want as a client. You want more scrutiny.
Yeah.
But yeah, because the alternatives, perhaps you didn't quite get that quite in the same way, which is, where the industry went. And unfortunately, we're back there again, arguing for it, and that's what we're getting anyway. So,
Yeah.
much more regulated industry, as you say. It's come back full circle.
Sure. I see we've got Paul Cook. Paul, where are you from?
I'm from Harrow. I work with Ray as part of the
Oh, hi.
M&E team. He just invited me along to sit in and listen.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, it's interesting.
For a late start.
No, not at all. What we're doing at the moment, just on what Paul White was just saying there, what we're trying to do at the moment, is look at standardizing inspections. So the idea being that if for example we can have some more standardized inspections, then that might be something that is going to reduce risk by the as far as the insurers are concerned. So we've started with fire doors.
Okay.
And we've got a work stream that started about 2 weeks ago, where we've got about 50 or 60 fire door specialists collaborating around producing some standardized inspection procedures. And we're robbing something from the NHS with their permission. They produced something about 3 or 4 years ago, where they've got 3 types of inspections: one of new fire doors, one of existing ones, and then one going on, on an ongoing basis. And we've got that team already operational. They've got their second meeting next week, and we're hoping to have that cracked within the next month. And then it means that we've got something to base it on. And the reason I'm mentioning it, Paul, is that we're doing the same for smoke vents.
Right. Okay.
And we'll then roll on and probably do penetration seals or whatever. So if you're interested, if you're an M&E person, that might be something that you'd want to participate in.
Yeah, I think I've lost 10 minutes. I think the comment about people not wanting to take accountability and buck passing, I think, is an extremely important comment in our sector at the moment. But yeah, I do think simplifying stuff is what we need, because we've got too many subcontractors that want to complicate things when we do need to take them to their simplest form. So I think it's a good idea to simplify it as much as we can across our sector. But also, I do think the NHS are a mile in front of us as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested, I'll share with you what we're doing on the fire door side of things. I mean, it might it would give you an indication of the sort of route of travel that we're going.
How do the NHS do it on their new builds, George? So do they set standards that then they'd expect the contractor's quality assurance process to follow, or do they employ independent inspectors to do the quality assurance piece? How do NHS do it?
I don't think they prescribe that per se. What they're doing, they've got standard specifications called HTMs, Health Technical Memoranda, which are being used by designers principally to there's HBNs, which is the Health Building Notes, and HTMs, which is the Health Technical Memoranda, and they're used to try and make sure that the right product's selected for the right job. So that's one level. In terms of workmanship, I think there's very different ways that it's done. The principal reason that they did this guidance, which is quite a substantial piece of work. But it breaks it down into what do you do with a new door to make sure that it's been installed properly and it's of the right spec. What do you do with an existing door to make sure that it's fit for purpose? And those two inspections only happen once.
Mm-hmm.
There's then a third level of inspection, and that's the ongoing inspections. And those are the three levels. And then there's a fourth section, which is putting together a fire safety or a plan, fire door plan, as it were. So we're basically taking that as a baseline and then working back from there. But I'm not sure. I think different projects work differently.
Okay.
Hello, Colin. Where are you from?
Good afternoon. I'm from Oxford City Council.
Oh, hello. Hi.
Hi there. So apologies that I'm late. I had to do the school run, so.
No problem. Yeah. So, do you have any high risk HRRBs?
Yes, I've got 5.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. And where are you on that journey in terms of your information?
I'm all over the place, to be honest. So currently, I'm just working on trying to gather all the information into one place and to start putting the building safety case reports together. So I've already put a template together for that and started populating some of the information within it. And then I've also then built a filing system as well for the golden thread of information. So I've got that sort of in place, and now I'm just gathering information, to finishing off the floor plans for the emergency services, so they've got electronic versions of those, and to update the information boxes on site. I've also been tasked with carrying out the fire door inspections as well, so I've just created a fire door inspection sheet for that as well. So yeah, fingers in lots of many pies, to be honest with you. But it's sort of getting its way there. Sorry.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, I'm quite lucky in some respects that we've had a load of refurbishment works that have gone on over the last 5 years. So all our cladding on our high rises are to spec. New fire doors in communal areas and stuff. So and I have all that information to hand, which is quite handy. So
yeah, what might be useful, because some of the people on the call have already seen what I'm just about to show you, but we've got some resources that we've developed over the last couple of years that might be useful to you. So I'll just very quickly show you, and then maybe we set up a session afterwards for also anybody else that's interested, that we can do it on a one-to-one basis, if that will be helpful. I'll just show you. This was put together by our working group, Golden Thread working group, as to the things that you needed to have to be able to put together your safety case. So the methodology that we're using was to do what you've just said there, and that's step 1: get together everything you've already got. Yeah, which is largely documents and some data files into some sort of container so you could identify what's missing. Then step 2 is turning that into machine readable information so that you can connect things up, so that, for example, schedules of accommodation can be tied back to the floor plans. And then if you've got them, 3D models, then add those in as well. Yeah, but the critical thing is that BIM isn't just about 3D models, it's about the data. So we've then aligned it back to the IET's digital twin methodology, but this is the meat of it, really. It's a method by saying you first of all start off by creating digital containers for you to put things into, which might just be the site, so that you've got a record of the site and maybe the list of units on the site. Then when you've got that together, then have those as proper CAD plans with layering and done to the right protocols, and then any risks related to that, any 360 photos or laser scans or whatever, then put those in there. And if you've got, as I say, if you've got a 3D model, then use it. And then at the building level, these are the things that the team identified as being likely to be asked, you know, the height of the building, etc. And then drilling down, what systems are in there? So do you have system drawings, and then are those drawings structured in a proper methodology? The same with floors. Then units and spaces. Do you have the UPRN numbers? Do you have a personal evacuation plan, for example? And then drilling into asset types. So being able to manage things both at an asset type level and what sort of documents you might need against asset types, and then going into every instance. So an instance is an individual asset rather than a type of asset. So all the different types of doors, for example, and then the individual doors. And then, you know, maybe what certification and things like that are against each item. Sorry if this is a bit detailed, but it's a checklist really. Then products, what products were installed, and was that, you know, how do you get those into something that's machine readable? Procedures, and then the asset information model, and finally the records. Yeah, so I'm happy to send this over to you, and is that of any interest to anybody else? Oops.
If you excuse me, if you could send it to me as well, please, so I can have a closer look in my own time.
Yes, please. It's very interesting.
Yeah,
George,
yes,
you know,
please. Yeah.
I mean, I mean, we've also got information which I think also might be useful to you on this was the report that we did that went to the government, which I can go through with you, not now, but this is basically the results of the work that we did. The round table, there's, you know, various people on this call have contributed quite a lot to this. So this is looking at, we've got guidance on AOVs, fire doors, cavity barriers, fire alarms, risers, emergency lighting, etc. So we've got detailed documents on each of these, and also looking at things from a risk-based perspective, because that's what the HSE told us that we needed to do in terms of asset data. Look at it from a point of view of what's the hazard? The hazard's the spread of smoke, and then being able to then run that through. And then
can I suggest to anybody who wants any of these, if you just put a note in the chat, then we won't miss you.
Yeah, please do. Yeah. And then this is more recent stuff that we're doing, decision trees, in terms of when, for example, you know, how do you know that the fire damper or smoke damper that was selected is has actually is the right one for that particular substrate?
George, are you sharing your screen?
I don't believe it. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I'm not seeing it, so I guess nobody else is.
So all that, there was no.
Yeah, but it was nice to hear, though.
Richard. Okay. All right. Well, I'll. Yeah. Sorry about that. I thought I was showing the document, but I think probably the best thing would be for us to. I'm very happy to set up a smaller group or maybe even one-to-ones to just go through this, because I think you might well find it useful, because the fire door guidance, for example, as an example, it breaks down what is a fire door, and then what are the risks that you're preventing, and then what do people do to fire doors to stop them from working, and then what information do you need? I mean, we were talking earlier about the gaps, the door closer type, gaps in the frame, etc. And then going on to tasks and procedures, what do you inspect? And standard maintenance procedures, for example. So this is the thing we're trying to recreate with the work streams. So yeah, it's really frustrating that I screwed that up. But anyway, that's what this is what I'll share with you that I was speaking to so elegantly. Basically, it goes through what do you need to do at a site level, then what information do you need at a building level, what information do you need at a systems level, at a floors level, and then down to individual units, and then asset types, and then the individual assets themselves. So I don't know if that's the sort of thing that you're already thinking of, but this
George,
is...
sorry, can I just interrupt you, because David's got to leave shortly and he's put a question in the chat.
Of course.
Yes, David, of course we'll share these, and yes, they're available on the BIM4Housing website on the home page.
Yeah. So but I'd be Colin, if you wanted to set up if we set up a one-to-one, I can just spend half an hour just going through them with you, and also showing how you can apply them. So if anybody else wants to do that, I'm very happy to do it. Well, we've got quite a lot more people that have joined.
Yeah, can I suggest again that if you're interested in having that kind of briefing, one-to-one or whatever chat, put a note in the chat, and then we won't miss it.
Yeah. So Paul Cook, from an M&E perspective, would you say that we've covered the things that are critical from your perspective? What asset types do you think would you be focusing on?
Well, from the point of view of fire safety, our biggest ones are alarms, aren't they?
Yeah.
I spent a bit of time at RBKC, and we obviously had mechanical shutters that came into play, obviously to shut out the windows, etc. We had trouble getting access to properties to actually check those. So we were checking the communal area, but we weren't checking the flats. When I made it quite clear, that made no sense, because the fire's going to start in the flat, smash through the window before the actual mechanical shutter shuts. So it's things like that we need to be looking at as well. The slightly weirder stuff away from the norm. But,
that's really helpful. Yeah. So what sort of people would manufacture mechanical shutters? Are they used commonly on?
I've only ever seen them on. I've only ever worked in one organisation which was using them, but basically because they had communal escape routes with flat windows,
Yeah.
They had to have communal shutters on the windows as well as obviously fire doors on the doors.
Yeah.
So people could get past the window as well as the door. And I actually wonder how many I ignored across the country, because I've seen buildings before we were putting actually doors, you know, on escape routes, we're putting fire doors on, but actually next to the escape route is the actual kitchen window. So I don't know how much we're ignoring that concept across the country at the moment. We definitely had them at RBKC for 100%.
So you've got a fire door in a wall with a window
No, yeah.
next
So
to it.
if you so you got your escape route, which is an external escape route. You've got your fire door to allow people to go past it, but then we've got a window next to that that's got no protection, realistically.
So basically, that's, excuse my ignorance, I'm not a construction professional, but that would make the compartment pretty much useless.
I'm not a construction professional either,
Yeah.
no, but that's the way I see it as well.
Yeah.
That we're defeating the actual objects and some of our bigger. But yeah, we definitely had them. There was definitely at RBKC. They had metal shutters but they were very hard to maintain because of access reasons.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
But yeah, I think next time you walk around and see a block, if you've got fire doors on the outside and you've got windows next to it, just think about the compartmentation.
Yes. Yeah. Be interesting. A lot of what we're doing at the moment, we're having as we're doing the surveys, we're taking 360 photos so that we've got evidence of there. But I think that's going to be very useful, because I think it's going to become a learning thing as well. So I can't quite visualize what you're saying at the moment in terms of what a mechanical shutter looks like.
Basically, just a mechanical shutter just drop down in front of the window.
Yeah. And what's it made of? Is it a metal?
Yeah, it was metal. It was a metal shutter that came down in front of the windows.
And it's triggered by the alarm system, presumably.
Yeah, we have fire alarm, communal fire alarm system with detectors in each dwelling.
And it's to the window goes to the external, or?
Yeah, so the
inside?
windows for these were so basically they were sort of external escape routes, but because of the way the construction was, it had a sort of half a roof, so it wasn't fully external, but it was the escape route for the block. So
Yeah.
I wonder how many other properties have got metal. So if you, in my head, I'm thinking metal, your metal escape route that's on the outside of a building that we're putting fire doors on, that are still passing flat windows.
Ah, yes. Okay.
So,
Yeah. So it would mean basically you couldn't use the fire escape because a fire could be coming through the window down.
yeah, in a worst case scenario.
Has anybody been involved in doing the safety cases at the moment? David, are you still there, or have you gone?
No,
Yes,
I'm still here, George.
Yeah.
Still here.
I was just wondering, are you one of the early adopters?
No, we're not. We've so I've had kind of distant involvement with this. Our building safety team's been doing some work on safety cases. They ran a trial with a company called Adelard, who had a piece of software that had been developed. My understanding is within the kind of oil and gas industry.
Yes.
Who I believe have been doing safety cases for a number of years. So Adelard had a bit of software that was basically a series of questions that needed to be answered, that then generated the data, that then generated a safety case. I don't think we've adopted it. It wasn't quite transferable for us in terms of how we wanted to use it, but I think we've taken the principles of it and we're trying to develop something similar ourselves. So I sense that we're producing something a bit more bespoke to suit our requirements, but I've had no more involvement than that, George.
Who's leading that from your perspective?
So Jake LePage, who
Yeah.
you know, yeah, it's his team that will be leading on it.
Yeah, I might have a word with him actually, because we built some new functionality into ActivePlan to enable you to take spaces, group them together, and then look at the assets that are protecting those spaces.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that you can. It's my thought we may be able to visualize the safety case, which is going to be, I think, a useful thing.
Yeah, yeah. No, that sounds powerful. Sounds powerful. Yeah.
I mean, what one of the reasons we're doing it is because invariably, FMs haven't been very good at telling designers and constructors how they want the information structured.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for that is that they probably don't know. They probably don't know how they're going to want to use it. So what we've done, we've actually said, right, let's make it so that we can take the information that, let's say, Joe creates, and as long as it's classified properly and structured in a proper way, then we're making it so that the FM can group things together in ways that make sense to them dynamically.
Yeah.
So you're not changing the underlying data; you're just creating a view.
Yeah, I understand.
And we've been doing that with several hospitals, and it's gone down very, very well with the FM teams, because they're sort of empowered. Because normally what happens is they'll take information and then they'll hold it off in something else and try and do it in spreadsheets.
And that's exactly where our asset management colleagues are right now. And that's the piece that needs to change. So yeah, that's the same journey that we're on.
So your asset management colleagues, that would be somebody other than Jake?
Yeah, so Jake heads up the building safety team.
Yes.
That there is a separate asset management team. So you will know Rupesh as
yes, yeah.
Yeah, so Rupesh is the data manager who would span both of those teams.
I'll speak to Rupesh then. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
it'd be good to. Well, what I'm trying to do at the moment is really just understand how people might find it useful to do this, because the safety case, it gives a complete different perspective on how you want things grouping.
Yeah, I'm not as close to it as I should be, George. So I can't really comment. It seems to me that there are two things going on here. You've got the safety case, which is basically evidence of a risk assessment and evidence that risks are being managed.
Yes.
But then you've got the whole evidence piece that sits underneath that, which is demonstrating the data that you hold, how you hold it, how available it is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd imagine at the moment our focus is on the first bit, and the asset and building safety guys haven't got as far through yet how they want to hold data and manage the data. But I suspect it'll be a useful conversation for you to have with them.
Yes, absolutely.
And forgive me, I need to duck out to another meeting, George. But it's good to catch up with you. It's good to see everybody.
No, absolutely. Thank you. And
right, George, take care.
We'll have a follow up maybe in a few weeks' time with the new people.
Yeah, that'd be really good.
Good.
Thanks,
Thank
George.
you, David.
See you,
Joe. I think I'd be quite interested in having a one-to-one with you on that, because I think from a data perspective, I mean, you're going to be all over it, but I think maybe it's just occurred to me with your surveying colleagues, it might well be that you could give us quite an interesting insight to that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the discussion you're having there is ringing a lot of bells for me, and we do have some clients who, exactly as you described, they know where they want to get to in terms of digitizing their information, but they can't tell us how to do that, because they will quite honestly say we don't know ourselves, but we do know where, the longer term direction that we want to get to.
Yeah.
So in those instances, as long as we're delivering structured data to them, I think we're doing the best that we can do. But yeah, there's other discussions that I'm sure that we could have with some of our surveying side as well, because as I said before, they put a totally different spin on a lot of these. So you know, I'm an architect by training, and that's my kind of background. But I'm now straddling these two camps, and it's quite interesting. They're two different worlds, it seems. So
no, absolutely. Okay, right. Is there anything anybody else wants to cover today?
not from me, George. That's been good.
Okay.
Good from me. Thank you very much. All very useful to go around all this and the insurance and discuss roles and things. Yeah, and responsibilities. Great. Thanks.
There's obviously some new people on the call. So is there anything that's come out of this that you'd find useful?
Yeah, for me personally, yeah, I found it useful that people are actually on the same page. I sometimes feel people aren't on the same page when you talk to people outside of groups like this. So it's nice to actually be invited to a group where you feel like you're talking to the same sort of people, the same sort of ideas. So thank you.
Yeah. I'll just show you concept. I was sort of describing what I was saying there with grouping. So if I just show you what we're doing here, we've got data. This is actually for a school, but here we've got data. That this is the sort of thing that Joe and the design team would produce. This is a Kobe data set here. So what we've got here, we've got floors, we've got layouts, and these are all data containers that you can put things into. So this sort of structured data you can then use to, it's picking up there. The first sections of that are the schedule of accommodation, but this has only been achieved because it's been created properly as structured information. But then what you're then also able to do is then, and this is the point I was making earlier about grouping things together, you can group together spaces on the fly as a user and just say that I want to put those all into a fire door container and or fire corridor, for example. And what I can also do is group together things like fire doors, and I can then see where the doors or which doors have got that particular attribute, which rooms they go in and out of. But I can also then group them into which are 30-minute or 60-minute doors, and then see those on a plan. So again, it's just a way of visualizing the information in different ways. And by doing that, you can also see which corridors they're in and which spaces they're supporting. So our thought is this is a really helpful thing in terms of being able to relate it to the building safety case, because you're actually looking at a combination of what are these spaces being used for. I mean, if this was a block of flats, you'd be identifying which are the communal areas, where the kitchen is, what are the measures that are in place to protect against that, and then obviously you can then drill into the detail and see what type of door and specification it is. So what, for me, it would be helpful to really understand whether that's the sort of thing that you might want to do if you're doing a risk assessment of a particular group of assets. Because the other thing that you can do with this is say it's not just the doors, but it might be a combination of the doors, the smoke vent system, the fire alarm system. So you can group those together as as a measure. But anyway, is that of any interest?
I mean, from my perspective, it's hugely valuable because that kind of reflects how we design the information in the first place, which is more often visual than anything else. So I think one of the problems is we're dealing with a lot of data, aren't we? That there's huge databases behind this, and we don't, or not many of us can handle that data and can think like that. But we can very quickly use systems like that to visually interpret that data in something that you can understand in a snap. So you can very quickly see if that information looks correct. Have I missed a door? Is there a door, a rogue fire door for some reason that's being picked up in the data? So I think that's hugely valuable. Yeah.
Yeah. If there's spaces, for example, that have been missed out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because that's one of the problems, isn't it? That you might have a space that neither the architect nor the M&E engineer actually owns, like risers and things like that. And yet and if that isn't actually identified as a space, then when the assets that have gone in that space are placed there, they're not scheduled, so but the other thing is, I mean, if you're a Revit wizard like you'd probably be able to find all this in Revit, but 90% of the people, even within an architectural practice, probably 50% of the people, they're not, are they?
Well, the exact same people I was talking about in terms of saying, we want all this data, we understand, we want to digitize our estate. Some of them also have gone down the route of using Revit as a tool to do so, to interact with their FM platforms, etc. And I always question that because I kind of think, and we've done it, we've handed Revit models over to them, and then they've gone, great, what do I do now? How do I produce a plan? And I'm kind of thinking, well, and they'll freely say, well, we've got what we asked for, I suppose. But now we've got to admit that we can't drive this. And nor should they really, in my mind, because that's an authoring tool. It's a production tool. It's a very different environment to be consumed at the other end. So something like you've just showed me, most of the information that I see used in existing FM tools are still plan-based, aren't they? I mean, I do always question the value of the model, and I shouldn't maybe say this as a BIM manager, but to me, the data is more important than the 3D model. You've got the real thing. It can solve some niche issues, I think, but I think we still consume information in plan views still, and very simplistic plan views. So I really liked what you showed me there. I've got some ideas probably to discuss with you for our own use. So as an architect, an architectural practice, we do hundreds of projects a year. And in the back of my mind, I'm kind of thinking, I want an asset library of all of our projects. I want to be able to query how many apartments have we delivered in the last 3 years, and again, exactly the same kind of challenge, risk-based challenge. We couldn't foresee some of the things that have come out in recent years in terms of material risks. So I'm kind of thinking, well, we've got all this information, we produce it for our clients, and then we put it on a archive server somewhere, and it just never gets used again. And that, to me, that's a waste. From a risk perspective, we should be developing our own asset database, so that when the next risk that comes up, we can quantify that quite quickly. So it could be anything, couldn't it? It could be, where have you used this particular flooring type because it self-combusts, or you know what I mean? We don't know what the future holds. So
Yeah,
I think that's quite an interesting point, actually, that I think we should throw out. You said, Joe, that you really think you see the value in creating your own asset data set. I mean, is that something that any of the other guys are doing? Colin, is that something? Do you go into this kind of dig into this kind of detail?
Not obviously not quite in the same format as what that is. Obviously, that's all singing and dancing. But yeah, to a certain extent anyway. So yeah, within my folder, the way I've built it is that you will have everything subsection, like subfolders, and within that, let me just pull it up for myself, just so I know I'm telling you correctly. But yeah, so you would have, like, obviously your building safety case report, then building information, and within that you've got obviously all your building plans, so that'd be your floor plans, your door plans, and then building works, obviously any building works that you've had gone on, so any changes to the building, fire safety folder, and then within that obviously all the subsections: fire strategy, fire risk assessments,
what about the actual assets? Do you have details on the actual?
Within that, obviously we'll have the door plans, so that'll obviously, for every single floor, what fire doors we have in each area. Obviously in the high-rise building, when it comes to assets, it's not massive, if you ask. You got your FD30s, your FD60 doors, and then apart from that, not a huge amount. Obviously your fire alarm, you've got your smoke detectors and stuff.
Sure.
But that's everything in a nutshell. So I mean, I don't think that I have to go into as much detail as because I have PDF documents with that information in. I have Pyrotex install manual for the fire system, and obviously where all the smoke detectors are. So that's all asset listed anyway. But yeah, within a nutshell, things are going that far in depth, but just as I said, not in the same
way,
not in the same way as that is. I mean, obviously I would love it to be in that way, but obviously I work for the council, and we don't have that kind of money available to build anything like that. But yeah, it is quite in depth with the information that I'm collating for that. But luckily, as I said, where it's only a high-rise building with limited assets, it's not as difficult as it would be for other buildings.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that the first point is to make sure that you've got all of the documents, but it's the interrelationship of the documents that I think becomes a bit of a challenge, because if you've got well, let me just again show you an example. This is a project that we actually used to create that example. So this is fairly typical, I think, of the information. So you've got what architects often will do. They'll create styles of doors, so door types, and then maybe with some annotation in there to explain the specification. You've then got a different you've then got a drawing, a PDF. I think that's the sort of thing that you're talking about, isn't it? Sorry, I apologize. So the point about this is that you've got a drawing there that you've got to visually read. You've then got a compartment drawing and then you've got a schedule.
Is this what you've got, Colin?
So you've got those things as separate documents, probably all in the same folder, or different folders. You might have your schedules, you might have your commissioning certificates.
Yeah, I do have some of that information. I don't actually have the schedules at the moment, but that's all stuff that I'm trying to get hold of at the moment. Yeah. So
in process.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that the key thing is obviously fundamentally you want to make sure that you've got the data, or sorry, you've got the documents, but it's then a matter of going through the exercise. That's what that checklist was going through, because really what you want to know is you want to know which door is being inspected, not just that 50% of the doors or 100% of the doors have been tested and 10 of them have failed. Which 10 have failed, and which spaces have does that affect? Or if you've got a ventilation system, because the other obviously issue that we've got at the moment is mold. So if you've got a ventilation system, what spaces is that ventilation system supporting? So it's the interrelationship often, Colin, that yeah, I think that we struggle with, and you know, people have then got to dive into, well, they've got to interpret things, and the methodology that we're trying to introduce is if you've got somebody who is something of an expert, then they only need to do it once to tie together the room list, the space list, and the drawings. And then if you've got schedules that relate to those, just make sure that the reference that's on the schedule is consistent with the reference that's in the drawings. And because what often happens is that the architect will produce their drawings, and they'll use a room referencing that makes sense at the time, but then maybe another architect takes over because the construction company appoints somebody else, and they might start again and they do renumbering, yeah, or and of course anything that was then identified before has the original room numbers against it. This happens all the time. I don't know if you've come across that, Colin, but so you end up not having anything that relates to each other. We're doing this quite a lot with reverse engineering O&Ms, and you come up with some real understandable things that have gone wrong, but it doesn't really help if you're in a crisis situation and you're trying to figure out you know, what is that wall type.
Yeah. So I've only just been, sorry, I've been working for the council for 4 months now. So obviously
Right,
this
okay.
is so I haven't been in the job very long. And beforehand I used to work for Thames Water and I was more compliance, health and safety. So this is just, you know, this is a whole new ball game for me.
Yes.
And just trying to get my head around everything. Now we use it's like a sister company to Oxford City Council, which is done by ODS, and they use a different system to us when it comes to scheduling in works and stuff like that. So I'm still trying to get my head around the way everything works and understanding, you know, how we go about things and what happens if, you know, as I said, well, we have monthly meetings anyway where anything that's been raised, it's then followed through to make sure that something is going to happen. You know, nothing falls by the way. But as I said, at the moment, I'm still really trying to find my feet with everything. So,
no, I think from what you're saying, you're doing exactly the right thing. You're you know, you've got folders and you're gathering together the information. I guess what I'm saying is, you know, there's a potential whilst you're doing that to identify a little bit more classification and structure to it.
Yeah. No, well, as I said, like previously, there was no real structure anyway behind storing information.
No.
So yeah, it's nice to be able to be putting things in place for that.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Richard, you want to take over?
That means George's throat is sore. Okay, guys. Well, listen, that's great, and it's very, very good to see the new people coming along. Colin, I'll send you a message later, and maybe we'll hook up for a quick 50-minute one-to-one chat just to talk about status and stuff. I'm trying to get a view myself, sort of a helicopter view of where the different organisations are in terms of the Fire Safety Act and the upcoming Building Safety Act. Just a quick chat, really, but just so I can get like a sort of a market view, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, I would really appreciate that, to be honest, because obviously it can bring other things that I may have missed. Because
well,
I'll be.
Well, the thing is, it's anonymous, Colin, so I can obviously tell you what unidentified other people, what's going on and this kind of thing. So hopefully it'll help you, be of value to you as well.
Yeah, no, that'd be great, please.
Excellent, excellent. If no one else has got anything else to say.
Okay. Well, Paul, make sure that we've got your details wherever you're going to. You're not going to escape that easily.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you're not getting away, Paul. There's no, you know that, don't you?
Thank you, folks. Yeah, that's appreciated. Thanks. Yeah, we'll let you know. Yeah, I'll see how the land lies, of course. But yeah,
of course. But
speak to you soon. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Have you got,
Thank you.
We
Cheers,
talked
guys.
about, yeah.
Great
Joe,
stuff from Joe. Yeah.
Hey, Josh.
Do you want to set something up maybe for, I don't know if you're around on Friday or something like that?
Let me quickly look in my calendar. Friday looks up.